Hi students, how you doing? So we're going to continue our discussion on sine and cosine graphs, but today we're going to be doing some transformations. So students will be able to graph sine and cosine functions on a coordinate plane. Alright, so we've got this constant, this c value, that's going to tell us if we're going to shift the graph up or down. So if it's a positive c value, we're going to shift it up that many units. If it's a negative c value, then we're going to shift it down that many units. The coefficient of the sine or cosine, so the coefficient of the trig function itself, we call that the a value. Alright, the absolute value of that is going to be our amplitude. Alright, the b value, there's technically a b value in front of the x right here, that gives us our period. So our period is going to be 2 pi over that b value. And then finally, we have a horizontal shift. Now, anytime you have a parentheses, you think opposite. So if that's a minus d, we're actually going to go to the right d, that many units. If it's a positive d, we're going to go to the left, that many units. Okay, so we take a look at our first graph here. We have y equals the cosine of the quantity x minus pi halves. Okay, so start off with the amplitude. So my amplitude is still going to be 1 here. My period is going to be 2 pi over 1, so that's just going to be 2 pi. And now we have minus pi halves, so it's inside a parentheses, so we think opposite. So we're actually going to go to the right pi halves. Now let's think about that. If my period is 2 pi, so if I go ahead and mark out those tick marks, remember to get the x values, you go 1/4 times the period, which is 2 pi. So that is pi over 2. So I've got pi over 2, pi, 3 halves pi, and 2 pi, right? So how many tick marks away from the origin is pi halves? So I'm going to say that right there is just 1 tick mark. So I'm going to move everything to the right, just 1 tick mark. Okay, so it's a cosine graph. My amplitude is 1. So normally I would start right here, but I have to move it to the right. So this is my point. And then normally I would go right here, but it says I need to move it to the right. So there's my point. And then normally I would go right here, but I have to move it to the right. And then normally I'd come back to here, but I have to move it to the right. Going to the left, normally I'd go back down, but I need to move that to the right. And then I'd keep going down, but move it to the right. I'd come back up, move it to the right, come back up, move it to the right. So my solid points is going to be my graph. Okay, let's take a look at the next one here. So we have y equals 3 times sine of the quantity x plus 3 halves pi. Alright, so my amplitude here is going to be 3. My period is 2 pi. So since my period is 2 pi, that means my tick marks, just like before, are going to be pi halves. Then we've got pi, then we got 3 halves pi, and then we got 2 pi. Alright, keep going here. Since I've got a plus 3 halves pi, you think opposite. So this says we're going to go to the left 3 halves pi. Now from the origin, how far away is 3 halves pi? That's 3 tick marks. So I need to move everything to the left 3 tick marks. Okay. So I'll graph my parent function in purple. Alright, so it's a sine graph. So the sine graph says I start right here at the origin, but I need to move that to the left 3. So 1, 2, 3. So that point's actually right here. Alright, then my amplitude is 2, so I would go up to 2, but it says I need to move that to the left 3 tick marks. So 1, 2, 3. So that puts me right here. And then I would come back down, but it says I need to move it to the left 3 tick marks. So 1, 2, 3. And then I would keep coming back down. I'd go down to right here to negative 2, but I got to move it to the left 3. So 1, 2, 3. And then I would come back up and move it to the left 3. Okay. And then going back to the left, I would go down here to negative 2, but says I got to move that to the left 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, so here's my graph. All right, my next one here. We have y equals -2 cosine of the quantity x plus pi halves. All right, so my amplitude is the absolute value of -2, which is 2. My period is still 2 pi, so I'm going to put my tick marks. So that would be pi over 2, that would be pi, that would be 3/2 pi, and that would be 2 pi. And then obviously go to the left, so that'd be negative pi halves, negative pi, negative 3/2 pi, and then negative 2 pi. All right, I have a plus pi halves, so you think opposite. So this is the left pi halves. So pi halves is just one tick mark. And we have a negative in front. So this says I have to reflect over the x-axis. Remember, you reflect first and then you shift second. Okay, so this is a cosine graph. So normally I would start up here at 2, but it says, okay, it's negative, so I have to reflect that down here to -2 and then move to the left 1 tick mark. So there's my first point. All right, and then I would be right here at 0. Can't reflect over 0 because that's just 0, and then move it to the left 1 tick mark. All right, and then I would come down here to -2, but I have to reflect that over the x-axis, so that puts me up here at +2, and then move to the left 1 tick mark. And then I would come back up to 0, move it to the left 1 tick mark. And then I'd go up to +2, but it says reflect it over the x-axis. So that puts me down here at -2, and then move it to the left 1 tick mark. All right, going back, I would go down to 0, going to the left. Can't reflect that, so we just have to move it to the left 1 tick mark. And then I'd go down here to -2, but I got to reflect that over the x-axis. So that puts me up here at +2, and then to the left 1 tick mark. I'd come back up to 0, and then move that to the left 1 tick mark. And there's our graph. All right, so go ahead and pause the video and you try this graph by yourself. And there we go, that's what we should get. All right, let's take a look at our next one here. So we have y equals -3 plus 2 times the sine of x. All right, so my amplitude here is going to be 2. My period is still 2 pi. Nothing's changing there. All right, but this says I need to move everything down 3 units. All right, so I put in my, this would be pi halves, this would be pi, this would be 3/2 pi, this would be 2 pi, negative pi halves, negative pi, negative 3/2 pi, negative 2 pi. Okay, so this is a sine graph. So I know a sine graph starts right here at the origin, and this says we got to move that down 3 units. So 1, 2, 3, right here. All right. Then my sine says we're going to go up right here to 2, but it says I need to shift that down 3 units. 1, 2, 3, so right here. All right, and then I would come back down to 0, shift that down 3 units, and then I would go down here to -2, and shift that down 3 units. Down here at -5. And then I'd come back up to 0. I gotta shift that down 3 units. Alright, going to the left now. So we'd go down here to -2. I gotta shift that down 3 units. So that puts me down here at -5. I'd come back up to 0, but I got to shift that down 3 units. And then I'd go up to 2, but I got to shift that down 3 units. That puts me at -1. And then I'd go to 0, but shift it down 3 units. All right, there's that graph. All right, so we've got y equals -1 minus 2 times the cosine of 5x. So we got a lot going on here. So my amplitude is the absolute value of -2, which is 2. My period is going to be 2 pi over 5. Now let's talk about the x values. So my x values, remember, is going to be 1/4 times your period, which is 2 pi over 5. So that reduces to 1/2. So that gives you pi over 10. Okay, so each one of my tick marks is a pi over 10. So this would be pi over 10. This would be 2 pi over 10, which is pi over 5. This would be 3 pi over 10, 4 pi over 10, which reduces to 2 pi over 5. All right, so let's keep on looking at it. And the only thing else I'm going to do here is I'm going to shift it down 1. And since you have a negative, this says we're going to reflect over the x-axis. Okay, so it's a cosine graph. So a cosine graph says I'm going to start at the amplitude, which is 2, but I have to reflect over the x-axis. So that puts me down here at -2, and then shift it down 1. So that puts me right here at -3. Alright, then I'd go to the right, so that put me right here at 0. Shift it down 1. Alright, then I'd go down here to -2, but I have to reflect it over the x-axis. That puts me at +2, and then shift it down 1. Alright, then my parent function says I'd come back up to 0. That says I just need to shift it down 1. And then I would go up to -2, but it says I have to reflect over the x-axis. That puts me at -2, and then shift it down 1. There. Okay, going to the left now. I'm going to go to 0. Just got to shift that down 1. Alright, then I would go down here to -2. But it says I have to reflect over the x-axis. That puts me up here at +2, and then down 1 puts me at 1. And then I'd come back up to 0, so I just have to shift that down 1. And then I would go up to +2, but I have to reflect it over the x-axis. That puts me at -2, and then down 1. There's our graph. Okay. Whoops. So go try to pause this one here, number 7, and then go ahead and look at it and check your work. All right, let's take a look at the next one here. We have y equals -3 plus 2 sine of the quantity x plus 1/2. All right, start off with our amplitude. Amplitude is 2. My period is 2 pi. We have a plus pi halves, so we think opposite. So this is going to go to the left pi halves, which is 1 tick mark. And then we're also going to go down 3. Alright, so let's label. So this would be pi halves. This would be pi. This would be 3 halves pi. And then this would be 2 pi. Alright, this is a sine graph. So I start right here at the origin. But this says I need to go to the left 1 tick mark and down 3. So right there. Alright, then I would go up to my amplitude, which is 2. But this says I need to go to the left 1 tick mark and then down 3. 1, 2, 3. That puts me right there. Alright, then I'd come back down to 0. But this says I need to go to the left 1 tick mark and then down 3. I'd go down here to -2, but this says I need to go to the left 1 tick mark and then down 3. So that puts me at -5. Alright, then I'd come back up to 0, but this says I need to go to the left 1 tick mark and then down 3. Right there. Alright, going to the left, I would go down here to -2. But this says I need to go to the left 1 tick mark and then down 3, so that puts me down here at -5. And then I come back up to 0, but this says, hey now, I gotta go to the left 1 tick mark and then down 3. And then I would go up to 2, but this says I need to go to the left 1 tick mark and then down 3. There we go. Alright, and now we got 4 minus 3 times the cosine of the quantity x minus pi. Alright, so my amplitude here is 3. My period is 2 pi. We have a excuse me, minus pi, so we think opposite. So we're going to go to the right pi, which would be 2 tick marks. Excuse me. We're going to go up 4. And since we have a negative in front of our cosine, this says we have to reflect over the x-axis. Okay. So we've got pi over 2, this would be pi, this would be 3/2 pi, this would be 2 pi. Alright, so it's a cosine graph. So I'm going to start my amplitude, that'd be up here at +3. But it says I have to reflect over the x-axis, so that puts me down here at -3. I'm going to have to go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and to the right 2. So that's my first point. Alright, so then I'd come down here to 0. So we can't reflect 0. So this says we have to go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and to the right 2, 1, 2. So that puts me right there. Okay, then I'd come down here to -3. But this says I have to reflect over the x-axis. That puts me at +3. So right here, 1, 2, 3, and then I have to go up 4 to the right 2. Alright, going to the left now, I would come down here to 0. But this says I have to go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I have to go to the right 2. Right here. Alright, I would go down here to -3. But this says I got to reflect over the x-axis. That puts me at +3, up 4, and to the right 2. And then I'd come back up to 0. That says I have to go up 4 to the right 2. And then I would go up here to +3, but this says I got to reflect it, so that puts me down here at -3, up 4, right 2. There's our graph. Alright, try that last one by yourself, and then take a look at it and check your work. Alright, great job today, guys.